What is up, YouTube? So today's video is going to be about the Jackery, because you know what? Jackery has a thing called Jackery Week coming up, and for anybody who's been interested in buying a Jackery, you're going to want to listen. The Jackery Explorer Power Station is one of the most popular solar power stations on the market, and for good reason. It has a diverse selection of sizes of power station to cover your needs depending on your situation, going as small as the very popular Jackery 240 and as big as the new Jackery 1500. And all of these products are going to be 15% off between the dates of May 17th and May 19th. So if cost has possibly gotten in the way, this might be a great time to snatch up a Jackery Explorer power station for yourself. So one might say at this point, I have a collection of Jackeries. I would also say I have a collection of Jackery panels that I very rarely ever used. I was really excited to finally get outdoors today and actually get to use the foldable Jackery panels that was sent to me with the Jackery Explorer 1500, which for right now I've been using indoors. So check out this clip I recorded earlier. So for all of you who saw my unboxing video for the Jackery 1500, which is sitting right here, guess what happened like a day after that video? It fell over. And not from this height, because this is pretty high. I'm sitting on my fridge right now, and this is on a rack that I've been putting my power stations on. Here's a little Jackery 300. As you can see, they're bungee corded down now for travel to the cart. So this beautiful machine is looking quite ghetto right now with all of the cables and wires and things like that sitting out of it. This is a triple splitter because I have a fridge and a freezer, and so I have a fridge and a freezer in one of these, because one of the things I always said about this Jackery unit is it doesn't have enough 12-volt ports, which is just adding to all the crazy zany cables that are going on right now. I have a cell phone cable cord going out right now. I actually have this because the Jackery 300, which is something I didn't mention before, charges through its Type-C port. So like it has two USB ports and a Type-C port, and you can do a slow charge through the Type-C port. Now it is a trickle charge. If you're using this to run a fridge and you're charging it through its Type-C port, it will run out of power faster than it can be charged through the Type-C. But right now this isn't charging anything, so I just have a little bit of a trickle charge going in there, and I'll top it off with something major later on. But it's nice. So the Jackery 1500 is actually charging my Jackery 300 right now. It's charging a cell phone, and it has not one, two inputs coming through it right now. Right now, my engine is running. I do not advise you keep your engine running all day just to charge your Jackery. I think for most vehicles that's going to be just bad. I'm no mechanical expert, but I've always been told like just sitting around running your engine all day is bad if you're not actually driving. But for the purpose of this video, I wanted to turn it on. I keep turning it back on. So this right now is the DC plug that comes with the Jackery 1500, which I have plugged into the second entry point. And I have this plugged into a 12-volt extension cord that I just leave unplugged in the front cab, because I've moved this so that it's right by the front cab. So when I sit down to drive, I then plug into the 12-volt port with the extension cord that's running off the Jackery cord, which means this I can quickly plug in while I'm driving, and I don't have to remove the solar charge. And that's because I asked Jackery to send me the adapter. Now this is the magical item you need if you want to use the solar you've been using for a Jackery that you've had in the past. Now if you're just getting this and you want to build your system around this, you can just use it as it is out of the box. But if you have the old 8mm input, what you need is this thing. and it's not on their website, and it doesn't come with the unit. You have to ask Jackery for this, and I of course got it as a reviewer, but they even mention it in the manual. Like, it is literally in the manual that this exists for people who maybe only have one Jackery panel, because one Jackery panel is going to have an end like this. This is an MC4 to 8mm connection, and the 8mm connection is what the old Jackeries use, like this. So for my Jackery 300, I could just plug this in there, and it'll actually, I'm curious. Yeah, so like most machines, most of the Jackeries, the Jackery 300, when I plug the roof solar in, it's just taking in the roof solar. It is no longer taking power from the Type-C port to charge itself. I'm going to unplug that because that's not what I want to do. I want to take my roof solar that already existed and send it through the Jackery 1500. So I plug it into the adapter, giving it the new end, and then I plug that into the Jackery 1500. And once I got that set up, it actually worked great. Like, as far as like it actually taking in a decent amount of solar from the roof, it worked perfectly. So, and the really cool thing about this over my Jackery 1000 is that I can leave my plug for the car when I'm driving hooked in. So when I do have the engine running, I'm combining the charge that I'm getting from the engine with the charge I'm getting from the roof. And that is really cool. So after getting a good wash up, I finally unpacked my Jackery panels, which had been sitting around in the box, honestly, since I had received the Jackery 1500. Now in the long term, namely in 2022, I'm looking forward to doing some more traveling, but right now I'm pretty static, and I'm pretty static in urban environments, so I really have not had a chance to use the type of panels that Jackery provides. So me and Mickey headed down to the park where I could actually pull these things out, test them, see how well they work, and we brought along my old panel that I got with the Jackery 1000 so that I could see if there really was any improvement in the panel's performance as well. Now this is one of my old panels. I got two panels with the Jackery 1000, and I ended up giving one of them away, not because anything was wrong with them, just because honestly at the time I wasn't using them very much. I had roof panels, I had alternative ways of charging the Jackery, and so I went ahead and I let somebody else have one of them for the cost of shipping. This one has been very beat up. It still works, but it's very beat up. In fact, one of my little legs here is torn and I have tape on it. And yeah, so basically this is how the leg opens. It has one little piece of fabric there, and here is where you find your 8mm cable. You could fit like an extension in here and extra things, like if you want charging cables in here. And this panel you can use to just charge things directly from the little port in here, which allows USB charging as well as Type-C charging. And that much about this panel has not changed. It still is mostly the same thing. There is magnetic closures here to kind of keep it closed. Like, it's not perfect. This panel has picked up some dirt, honestly, that I've had a hard time cleaning off. It is fabric, so again, out in the outdoors, it picks up dirt that is hard to keep off, and most of those things are still consistent with the new panel. So the new panel, let's pull one of them over here, doesn't look a whole lot different, to be quite honest. Like, at first glance, it honestly doesn't seem that different. Let's roll it up. Just like the other one, you have a big pocket here where you can put a lot of extra things. And then you have, all the way down here, a way to charge directly either a cell phone or anything on Type-C. So you have a USB port and a Type-C port. So anything that would use those things, you can charge directly from this panel without a Jackery Explorer. This panel on its own, just like its older brothers, this is the baby of the family, is very easy to carry. You have grommets, which you could use to hang on the side of a vehicle, a tree, some elevated thing if you wanted to. So you could also hang it as far as sitting it up. And they have made one small change to the leg. I have not had old versions of Jackery panels, so I don't know how much has changed along the way. But there's a little rubber leg there with like a little bridge that seems to make it more stable to sit up. I don't know if it'll prevent the type of tearing I did to my old panel, but it's still a piece of fabric. It will gather dirt really easy and be hard to clean. You know, you can wipe it down as much as you want, but when you're out in the dirt, what are you gonna do? So a lot of those things have remained consistent about the panel, even in this new one. It doesn't look a whole lot different. And if you're just talking about aesthetically, there's not a reason to get a new panel if you already own the old panels. So if you do get just the power station, let's say, of the Jackery 1500, and you already own old panels, like, is it really worth it to upgrade to this new panel? And I decided to just play around with my panels to see if I saw any difference, and you can watch that footage right here. So let's see if the old and new solar panels make any difference here. Currently I'm hooked up to the old solar panel and I am getting, it was like 50 watts 2 seconds ago. We almost dropped into the 40s. I'm dropping back into the 30s. So let's pull out the old panel. Let's grab one of the new panels off the Jackery 1000 and see if it's getting any better sun. Let's see. Oh, wow. Now that could be position, because this is apparently one of the more front panels. So let's go ahead and swap positions with where the old one was and see if it changes anything. So we are still on the, whoa, we're still on the new panel, so I just pulled it out. Yep, that seems to be more a position thing than anything. This is one of the new panels, bringing in 75 watts. Now this is the old panel going in a fairly similar position. And just bring in a little bit less. Of course, we can combine these in the pigtail. Bring it over here. And combined wattage is over 100 watts, which is really nice for a unit this big. And that's the thing about one of these guys. One panel isn't really going to do a lot for you for something this size. You really want a minimum of 2. But honestly, it would honestly be nice if this particular unit could actually bring in more than 200 watts. But what I do like is that this pigtail can be used with just one input. So if for some reason one panel becomes inactive, this pigtail will still function even with for some reason, if one, you know, panel wasn't working, this whole unit would still work. It would only just take in one panel, which is not true for the pigtails on the 1500. But there you go, playing around with mixing old and new panels. I guess I haven't done a double new on this, so let's see. This is the old panel. I have to keep remembering. So now we're on to new panels, and we are getting about 125-ish watts. Honestly, the mix between the old and the new panel doesn't seem to be a lot as far as like actual functionality. Like if you already have panels, there's not a huge reason to buy new panels with the new Jackery, it seems, or new panels for your old Jackery if what you have works and you have Jackery panels, because there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of difference here. Your old panels seem to be feeding at least the standard Jackeries just fine. But let's move on to the new model and see what happens. So now we're at our new guy with our new fancy screen that doesn't want to show itself in the sunlight. So it looks like, from my view, I'll see if this looks different in post. You guys can't really see it on camera, but I can. Sorry about the airplane in the background, so I'll just tell you what I see. Now currently, on one of their pigtails, I only have one solar panel in, mostly because I was trying to figure out my cords, and this does not work. So on this pigtail, if you only have one source of power in this pigtail, it will not work. So it will not work as a single line changeover. You have, if you only have one Jackery panel or one Jackery compatible panel, you have to get the single line adapter, and you have to write to Jackery for it. This out of the box needs a minimum of 2 to work and refuses to work without 2 inputs. So with one in here, this isn't doing anything. That is not true for this one. If I put in one solar panel into this, the Jackery 1000 will still charge. It'll just be charging through this Anderson connection instead of this, but these two are equal. Now the bad thing about this is you can't charge through both. So you can't put your solar in here and then have another charging source going through here. It's either going to charge from here or from there, and from what I've seen, it'll just take the most dominant charge, but it can get screwy if you're trying to do with this what I'm doing with this when it comes to having my car charger always hooked up. But today, for right now, for this, we're finally breaking out these guys and using it the way Jackery intended. So let's get a charge going, and we're going to do all the new panels. So now I've plugged in 2 of the new panels, and I'm not sure how much you guys can see of this screen, but it's bringing in 144 watts. I think the glare from the sun is going to ruin it from you guys. I can see a little solar charging symbol and MPPT on the screen now that that's coming in. So we're getting 145-ish watts with just one paired set of panels. Let's go ahead and hook up another set. All right, so we got set number 1 hooked up and set number 2 hooked up. These are the 4 brand new panels that Jackery sent me with this unit, and I am bringing in 240-ish watts total. It's jumping as low as 237, it looks like, and sometimes it's hitting in the 250s, but now staying there long, 240 seems to be where it's averaging out. Okay, so now I have added one of the old panels to one of these branch connectors, and we did seem to lose about 10 watts on average. I was pulling in closer to, you know, 250. Now I'm averaging out, like, I'm dropping as low as 208 and going as high as, I don't know, like 240 maybe. But now I'm under 200. Now that also could just be, you know, wind blowing in or all that kind of stuff, but I saw an immediate drop, and now I'm getting less than 140 watts. But as soon as I hooked up one of the old panels, there was a drop in charge. So let's talk about the Jackery 1500 versus the Jackery 1000. So this, for a long time, was the biggest Jackery that you could get. And so retained a lot of popularity for that reason. It was also the first Jackery that could charge on more than one panel using this cool little pigtail here. And this pigtail also featured the first input, I believe, that was not your standard 8mm that is found in most Jackeries. Now, the Jackery 1000 did have this. It had an 8mm port, but that port was for one panel and one panel only. This allowed you to charge with two, which was a brand new feature in the Jackery 1000, and that connected to a fairly standard Anderson connector. That's what this is called, Anderson. Now, the good thing about this being an Anderson connector, it meant you could take this connector, the Anderson one, and also use it to connect to different types of solar panels with a connector that was common to the market. This connector is common in a lot of power station brands. And so, like, it allowed you to really use a lot of cables with both of these connectors to use non-Jackery panels as well. So, first feature that it had that was really cool was the first pigtail, which went from Anderson to 8mm. And it also had the standard connector that had been present in all of the Jackeries before it. So if you already owned the panel, you could plug it right in. If you want an extra panel and you already owned a panel, you could just add it to this and plug in with two panels. If you wanted to use an Anderson input from a different solar panel, you could. If you wanted to use an 8mm input from a different solar panel, you could. So it made charging it really flexible. Now, the thing about this thing, even with its MPPT charge controller, it doesn't have the quick charging of the newer Jackeries, so it still was kind of a slow charge, and that's the thing. Yes, it has a lot of power, but once it's empty and you're out in the middle of nowhere, how are you charging it up? And let's be real, even if you have two Jackery panels, you're not getting 200 watts the entire time. You're lucky if you're getting it some of the time. And so there's no way you're going to get this charge back up really quickly. So it was still really good not being used at full capacity. Unless you were just going out for a weekend and then you were just going to take it home, plug it in a wall and charge it back up. But for charging it like as your sole power out in the middle of nowhere, you still wanted to err on the side of caution using heavy devices. And I know a lot of people were interested in this because they were like, will it run a microwave? Will it run an air conditioning unit? And even if the answer was yes, it was the wrong question, because the question is for how long? And so the slow charging nature of this makes it really unattractive to empty it out trying to just cool down for an hour. Does that make any sense to you guys? But that being said, it was a really great choice if, let's say, you had a fridge, you wanted to run your fridge, you wanted to maybe run a light or two, you had a laptop, and you needed to charge your cell phone on occasion. Like, this could do that really well and last you quite a bit. And if you're not emptying it out and you're kind of like recycling a charge through there, even if some days you get down to like 25 and only get back up to 75, this would last you really good. So this was a really powerhouse station for a really long time. And then the Jackery 1500 came along. Woo! So let's bring this guy over here. Now, I was really shocked. I was able to carry this Jackery 1000 and this Jackery 1500, honestly, at the same time, and it wasn't that big of a deal. I really thought one of the reasons Jackery was not going to get any bigger than the 1000 and maybe explore some other ways of portable power was I didn't think they could get to this size and still be portable. But I can honestly say, even though this is a little bit taller and fatter, it's just a little bit taller, and it's just a little bit fatter. Like, if I line this up with the back of the 1500, I only have about this much space that's left. So this is not that much bigger than the 1000 to have almost 500 more watts of usable power. So that's pretty impressive. Now, you're not going to be playing like run across the field with this, but it's very easy to pick up. If you've ever picked up a small generator, picking up something like this, I'm talking about one of those small portable generators, like picking up something like this is nothing by comparison. Now, the difference between picking up something like this and picking up a generator is the generator doesn't need you to carry 4 solar panels with it. And this kind of does. And so even though the solar panels on their own are portable, like I could take one of those solar panels, you know, like if I was sitting here having a picnic, I could have one of those solar panels out. I could have it charging my cell phone directly, and it wouldn't be that big of a deal. And I fold it back up, and on its own, it's really easy to carry. Now, when you get to 4 of those plus this unit, it does get a lot to carry. So the advantage of this portability is it's charged up, and you're not trying to keep it on solar while you are using it, which I think is a more ideal way to use it as a portable unit. I.e., if you are going to tailgate. If you're going to tailgate, sorry, camera angle's weird. If you're going to tailgate, then you would want to charge this up, use the power you use, and then once you're back home, that would be when you charged it back up. You wouldn't be trying to drag along this and the 4 solar panels at the same time. Now, I feel like when you're living fully off-grid, that can get a little bit more complicated because you want to be charging at every single opportunity that you can charge to make sure you have as much power as possible when you no longer have the option to charge it if you are depending on solar. Because the thing about solar power is it ends. Depending on where you are, on your own cabin out in the middle of nowhere or in a shared campground, you might still be able to use a generator when the sun goes down. It's still going to work. It might be rude if you're too close to other people because of the noise, but it's still going to work. You can put fuel in it at any time. It's going to work. It's going to have the same amount of power when you turn it on. That's a little more complicated with a solar station. So with solar in general, and this isn't a Jackery problem, this is universal with solar in general, just knows they're going to be prime hours of the day, and if you miss it, the amount of solar you're getting is going to change. And so for using this for the portability aspect, it's really, I charge it up, I'm going to take it out and use it, I'll charge it up later. And I'm not going to use so much of it that's going to be a problem. So could this run an air conditioner? Probably, depending on how many BTUs it is, how many watts it's using. And because these products vary across the range, I can't say if you go out and buy any air conditioner, this is going to work great for it, and you'd have to do your own math on how long that would last. Now, if that's the only job you have it doing, you also have to calculate your sun intake versus outtake or any other options you have for recharging this unit back up. People tend to think about the power they can get out of these things without thinking about how they're going to get power back into them, especially if you're using them as primary units. Now, as you saw in the video already, I have been using this with one port hooked up to my roof solar and the other port hooked up to its 12-volt charging that I plug in when I charge the car. Now, I was also able to do that with the 1000, but the thing about the 1000 is it does not have the lovely thing that this has, which is both ports can be charged at the same time. If I was charging that on the car, I was only charging it with the car. If I was charging it by solar, I was only charging it by solar. And if I was charging it while plugged in, I was only charging it while plugged in. I could take any of those options and combine them in the Jackery 1500, and this feature will also be true in the future Jackery 2000. And that's what makes this a cut above this for charging. Now, what makes it more complicated for charging is the fact that these are completely different ports than Jackery has ever used in the past. So this is a new proprietary hookup. This is what's going into this port. Give me a second, guys. I'm fiddling around here. This is what it used to look like. So it actually is different. Now, this Jackery also features not one, but 2 pigtail connectors, 2 of these. And the difference between this pigtail connector and this pigtail connector, as I've mentioned, yeah, I guess that works, besides design, I actually like that they inset these instead of having like these weird bunny ears. As far as design, that is an improvement on design. But the difference between this one and this one is this one, you can just put one panel in and it's fine. But it doesn't even matter on this one because this connector is the same connector that's in there. So you can actually go 8mm directly into the Jackery 1000. With this, you have to put in 2 sources, and both sources have to be power sources. So if you put in a source in this side and a source in this side, and this source stops sending power, the whole thing will stop sending power to the Jackery. So one, that means this cannot be used as a one-to-one converter for the old charging panels. There must be two. Number two, that means, let's say you used, I don't know, the Jackery 1000's AC adapter and a solar panel. If one of those stops receiving power, the Jackery 1500 will stop taking power from anywhere, even though there's still power coming from the solar panel, or there's still power coming from the 12 volt source. So that's something to keep in mind with this particular branch connector, is it only works if it's getting power from both sides, and it honestly doesn't work very well unless it's the same type of power. So it actually, I haven't tested it with panels that aren't Jackery. While you could plug into 8mm sources that aren't necessarily Jackery panels, if they are different, it actually reduces the quality of the charge if they're mismatched. So if you had like a 60 watt panel and a 100 watt Jackery panel, you wouldn't get the same quality of charge as two 60s or two 100s. I did experiment with that a little bit and found this out. This really likes two equal sources of charging on each end. Now that doesn't mean both panels need to be getting the same amount of solar, but all of their stats need to match, for lack of a better term. So this is really just built for Jackery panels, whereas you could kind of finagle this one a little bit more. It really was just sort of a pass-through combiner, for lack of a better term. So that's something that really changed with this, is now we have this proprietary connector to work around. So while being able to charge from two different sources is nice, transferring ways that you used to charge your old Jackeries might not be as easy. So now that we've covered how to get power into these things and talked a lot about them, let's talk about what other things I like, don't like about the two different units. So if you get these units, besides just getting 500 more watts, is there a huge advantage in getting the 1500 over the 1000, or would the 1000 work for you? So since we're going to talk about, it's always nice to have more power, but maybe the convenience of charging with the old charger is more important to you. And if it is, you might just want to go with the Jackery 1000. The Jackery 1000 is still a lot of power. It just cannot charge very quickly, but the thing is, you can only charge this quickly, one, if you have a house or grid type or generator type power source so that you can use the power brick, or you can have two inputs of charging that are actually usable on a constant basis. So deciding how much these charging, the ability charge, how you can charge, what you can use to charge these is important. After you've weighed that, what do you really get with this that's not here? Well, as far as AC ports, you can see they're identical. You get three. You get three here and three here. The Jackery 1000 has a 1000 watt pure sine wave inverter. The Jackery 1500 actually has an 1800 watt sine wave inverter. So not only does it have a bigger inverter than the Jackery 1000, it's almost twice as big. So if you're going to run really, really heavy devices, this device can do it. But as far as your options for plugging in, they're all here. Now, if you're just running stuff like hair dryers, blenders, general household items that might be under 1,000 watts, it might be worth it to save some money and just go with the Jackery 1000. If you're going with stuff that's a little bit powerful, or things that might be used at the same time, it's one thing if you're just using a hair dryer and not doing anything else. It's one thing if you're just using a coffee maker and not doing anything else. But if for some reason, I don't know, you want to combine things that might be a little bit over 1,000 watts, that's when this might appeal to you. Besides the reasons of just having more power, but more power to store is more power to store back up. And so you really have to debate between these two, because 1,000 watt power station is a lot. So let's talk about Type-C ports. Now what's interesting is this has less Type-C ports. It has one. The Jackery 1000 has two. So if this Type-C port is important to you, You get 2 here, you get 1 here. Don't know why. They have a giant face here. Why there aren't more ports, I do not know. That is kind of silly. As far as regular USB ports, you do have a 5-volt 2.4 amp port as well as a quick charge 3.0 port. You have the exact same thing on the Jackery 1000. And then the thing I've complained about constantly, and that is the one 12-volt port. Again, this has a huge face. You could absolutely have fit more than one 12-volt port here. And I know a lot of people feel like those 2 little 12-volt inputs are obsolete, but they are useful for expanding your 12-volt if you're the kind of person who knows how to use them. And if you're not, mostly you just ignore them and you still have what you need. But I think in standard old 12-volt port, they could fit more than one on here. And I think it's a great failing to the off-grid community that they still have not. But basically, you're getting the same thing. Like as far as like the number of inputs that you can use on this. And the major thing people use this for is a fridge, but if you bring a fridge with you on a trip or you're using a fridge constantly, that means your one 12-volt option is gone as soon as you use a 12-volt fridge on both of these units, which are huge. Like anything after the Jackery 500, and even the Jackery 500 could have offered more than one, should have had more than one of these. Now, one of the options for dealing with the limitation of this is using something like this or something like this. This has a standard 12-volt plug. They're mostly for use in houses when you have 12-volt stuff you want to use in houses, but you have a normal plug like the one you'd find in a house, and then you have a 12-volt on the other end. But this one can handle bigger loads. You even have to turn it on, and it has an annoying fan, so I try not to use it that much. But this converter, again, has a normal plug on one end, and then you can have more 12 volts. Well, besides you suddenly having all this extra stuff dangling out of your Jackery, so you know I can plug this in and plug this in. The problem with inverters is they have a power pole even when you're not doing anything with them. So here I am turning on my inverter, and then I'm going to turn on my converter, and I'm already pulling 6 watts before even using whatever I'm going to use, and now it's dropping down to 4. So I'm wasting power using this converter because I'm limited to one 12-volt port that's being used, and so I need to pull out this thing to cover my additional 12-volt items, and that's just annoying. So there are a lot of sizes of Jackery out there. I personally have the 300, which is my baby. I love the 300. The 300 is like what I would normally take outside with me. I very rarely took the 1000 out, and now that the 1500 has pretty much replaced my 1000 as my primary power source, I barely take the 1500 out, and honestly the 1000 has just been sitting in a corner. That's why the charge on it has been so low, if anybody has noticed throughout this video, because I pretty much have not been using it, and I'm thinking it might be time to find it a new home. And before you jump on it in the comments, I'm going to figure out a fair way to do it properly digitally. But now at this point that I've had the privilege of owning 3 Jackeries, what do I think about what you need to get out there on the road? And the honest answer is, it depends. This little Jackery 300, probably even something as small as the Jackery 160, would have served me a lot in the car. I did not have a fridge, and I just really wanted to make sure I could use my laptop when I needed to and keep my cell phone charged. And I was lucky enough that I had one of those cars that had a built-in inverter, so whenever I turned the car on to drive, I had an inverter, so I could have charged a small Jackery. It might have been a little much for that car as far as the alternator and stuff like that to charge something as big as these 2 units, but it definitely could have handled something as small as the 300 or anything smaller than that. So like a lot of people are trying to rush to get these big guys, and I'm not saying don't, but I'm saying like really think about your needs and what you actually need. Like what is going to serve you best. The good thing about this little guy is he's really easy to charge back up once he's empty, and I'm not asking him to run an air conditioner or charge a laptop or anything like that. So he's really easy to charge back up. And since I'm not asking him to run anything 24 hours a day, like a fridge, he holds on to power a little bit better than his big brothers, because as soon as I got his big brothers, I wanted them to handle some of my heavy lifting as far as power needs. So these smaller Jackery units, I'm talking about the 300, the 240, which so many people who bought the Jackery 240, which was one of the first major heavy hitters out there, love that thing. In fact, Jackery's first foray into a larger power station, which is no longer produced, wasn't that great. It kind of was slow to charge. It was kind of a slog, and it went out of production like really, really quick. Most people have forgotten it ever existed. But the little 240, it stayed a power hitter, and basically is the power station that propelled the Jackery to popularity. So if you're really thinking about what kind of Jackery do I want to buy for super, super simple needs in a super, super situation, don't sleep on those smaller units. Like, unless you're running something 24 hours a day that needs a lot of power, or are specifically bringing things with you that need like the large inverters or anything like that, these will get you very far. These little guys, these wonderful little guys will take you very, very far. They're very easy to carry. You know, I can hold this thing with one hand. I can't hold either of these like this, you know. I could even, if I needed to fit this in a bag really quick with some other items, this is gonna fit. These are not. So I really do like this, especially for going out and using my drone, or, you know, other situations, picnic tables, you know, if I'm, you know, at the mall and there's an outside patio area and I want to do some work and I need to work on my laptop. This is the thing I'm checking to see if I have enough power to run it to a table with me. So I really, really love this, especially for the urban side of my van life. What I'm finding with these bigger units is, with the exception of having them sort of being a replacement for building my own battery bank, which has advantages and disadvantages, which I've gone into in another video, so I'm not going to repeat it here. Besides that, it's really hard to get these outside to use them in my urban setups. Whereas this is flexible in every single situation. And with Jackery's Jackery Week deal, I just don't want people skipping over these, especially since I hear a lot, Jackery's too expensive for me. These guys aren't that expensive, and they'll do a lot for you, you know? Now, I've had a lot of mixed feelings about these guys as far as using them with the proprietary panels, using them with roof panels, etc., etc. I think if you were going camping, or if you're in off-grid situations where you might be running heavier electronics, that's when you want these. These are really good for running a fridge. I would say you'd have to get at least to the Jackery 500, which I do not own, before it's a logical thing to use to run a fridge. Could you plug a fridge in this? Yes, but you're going to drain it really quickly, probably, and then you're going to have to charge it back up. And you may not have a situation where you can get this charging fast enough to match its depletion, whereas these guys are going to have a lot more spare power to handle that kind of situation. So I would say the second you're considering a 12-volt fridge that you're going to use on a constant basis, either over a weekend, over a few days, things like that, then you want to be looking into the big guys. As soon as a fridge factors in, I'd be looking at least at the Jackery 500 or larger for that kind of situation. If you're going to use portable panels, and specifically Jackery's portable panels, they're not going to be great for urban living. They're really, really good for when you really are in a space where you have a lot of place to spread out. Like I said, I've had these panels for, I don't even know how long, because I had to send in the Jackery 1500 to get it replaced. It was totally my fault. It fell in an awkward way. I accidentally broke the screen, and Jackery customer service was super and sent me a replacement. I even had one on its way back while this one was on its way to me. It was great, and it was nice that I got to see sort of what the customer device replacement experience was like with the Jackery 1500, but it did delay me being able to put together this video that I was trying to put together. But these guys are really for that. When you get to that point, when you want to bring your coffee maker with you, when you want to bring your I keep thinking about coffee makers, hair dryer with you. This is something that you can plug a hair dryer or coffee maker in, but it's really better for single use devices, not things you were trying to, for lack of a better term, run. Personal experience, yeah, you could probably get a air conditioner running on the Jackery 1500, but are you going to be able to replenish what you're depleting? And that's what you have to think about. But this is amazing if you just want to bring your coffee maker. I'm not even a coffee drinker. Why do I keep talking about coffee makers? Or even like your plug-in kettle. I think that's silly because you can heat water over a fire, but that just is something what I thought about. Like if you want to plug in a kettle, if you want to use an induction cooktop. I'm not an induction cooktop girl. I'd rather not waste power on induction cooking, but anything you're going to use briefly that needs a lot of power just to start and run, that's what you want these bigger Jackery power stations for, to cover those needs. Especially on just a weekend trip or a week trip or something where you're going to be away from grid power for a brief time and then come back to the grid. Or even if you're living in an RV, something like this could still be great because you could charge this up really easily if in between staying on BLM land, you are also staying in RV parks where your RV is hooked up to power. So you're basically getting the same benefit as someone who's taking this back to a house and charging it up occasionally. And then when you go out, you have a bank of power for a little while. And if you need to tap off that power, you have your solar panels you can throw out. So this could be a really, really great complement to a RV setup. Now, is it a gas generator killer? I still don't think so. I mean, at the end of the day, a gas generator, gas powered, rather it's gasoline petrol as we know it, or propane, or even diesel, because that exists. A generator is going to give you the same amount of power every single time you turn it on. Whereas these guys are going to be controlled by your location, how much sunlight you're getting, and all of those things, and what other alternatives to powering them up you have access to. With a generator, you hook it up to its fuel of choice, and it's going to do its thing. But anytime you can avoid using that is good. It's putting less stress on the environment. I would never say don't take a gas generator. A gas generator is more dependable. But anything that can keep you from, putting those emissions in the air, if you can avoid it, is also good. So what this can do is probably stretch out the time that you don't need to depend on that. So in an RV situation or something like that, that's also where the benefit is. I don't think it's a gas generator killer, but it could be an optional backup complement. And that's the strength of these larger units, being able to handle more power. So I don't know if I've answered all of your questions about Jackery, or specifically the new Jackery 1500 and even the new panels. Like, are they worth it? Are they a real upgrade from whatever Jackery was doing before? I don't know if I've covered all your questions. I don't know if I can cover your questions. But if you do have any other questions about Jackery, about which one would fit your situation, put them in the comments section and I'll do my best to answer them. Do you already own a Jackery? Are you thinking about taking advantage of Jackery Week? It's a really good sale. I mean, one of the biggest things that comes up often about Jackery is the price, which isn't the worst complaint. I mean, unfortunately, sometimes things cost money because they're well made. And one thing you can say about Jackeries, whatever your complaint, is they are well made machines, and very, very, very few people have complaints about them. Like this thing isn't ever going anywhere. It's literally one of my favorite things. And it's just my Jackery 300. It's not even one of the new big fancy ones. I love this thing. It's been through all kinds of abuse. I carry it really easily. It's really easy to charge back up. I love this thing. This is my favorite of all of them. This one's never going anywhere. So if you're interested, and maybe your biggest holdback has been the price, Jackery Week is a great time to jump on a special offer. So do that. And if you have any questions, put them in the comments. If you own a Jackery, let us know how you feel about it. If you don't own a Jackery, tell us if you're interested in one. And if you're not, that's okay. If you were wondering, Mickey was hanging out in a tree for most of this review. So I was kind of slow with getting this one out. But I think it's kind of boring just to be like, here's a Jackery. If you push this button and plug something in, it works. Well, great, but literally anybody who takes one out of the box can tell you that. So I hope I at least put something in this video that was worth like looking at, that's more than your general, hey, look, it's a Jackery and it works type thing. Of course it works. Let's not be silly here. But I really want to give you sort of more information you can use to purchase in an informed way. I mean, I feel like that's the best thing I can do with these items when they're sent to me for review. So yeah, don't know if I'm doing the right thing, don't know if I'm doing the wrong thing. I'm in a blessed position that I don't always know how to handle, if I'm gonna be honest. Well, anyway, time for YouTube business. There is a like button underneath this video. There is a dislike button under this video. There is a way to leave a comment, and all of these things count as interaction. So let me know how you feel about the video by hitting all those things below. The YouTube algorithm just likes to see that people are interested, people are coming back, people are watching the videos all the way through, and being able to continue to progress as a YouTuber is highly reliant on those things. So I had to take care of that bit of business. Special thanks to my YouTube membership and Patreon supporters for throwing in that extra support that keeps me going.